Hello, everybody. And in this week's podcast, we're going to be speaking all about culture and traditions. And to begin, I'm going to tell you about some amazing, wonderful, and eye-opening traditions and cultural aspects in the UK. So let's get started. Yes, I am back once again, and this is another episode of the pod. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you enjoy this podcast and you find it useful to improve your British English. And if you are a fan, please leave a like. And if you're listening or watching on Spotify, then please leave a 5-star review so more and more people can discover the podcast. But as promised, I'm going to begin by telling you a little bit about British culture and traditions, and then we'll have a look at the lesson plan that I've been covering with my students in class this week. And as always, if you'd like to join my classes, you can find a link in the video description. So, when we think about the UK, England, and the United Kingdom, usually people associate it with tea and tea culture. It's probably the most stereotypical British thing. People in the UK drink tea constantly. In the morning, during work breaks, when visiting someone, after bad news, after good news, basically all the time. And a common line that you will hear somebody asking you is, "Do you fancy a cuppa?" Or, "Do you fancy a brew?" And both of these questions are ways of asking, do you want a cup of tea? And of course, we drink cups of tea at home, at work, but you can also go out for afternoon tea. And this is when you go to a tea room, which is another way of saying a cafe, and you'll have these little sandwiches, you'll have little desserts, pastries, biscuits with a cup of tea. So that's one cultural aspect about the UK. Let's move on to another one. And it is queuing. Yes, queuing up, waiting in line. Because British people are famous for loving orderly queues, and cutting in line is seen as very rude. I think it's the same in most countries. But people queue for pretty much everything. Buses, shops, concerts, pubs, basically everything. And I think it's just having good manners. It's just being polite. And the Brits often joke that queuing is a national skill. And I agree, because I'm a good queuer. I will never cut in the line. And if anybody does that, it drives me mad. If I see someone cutting in the line, jumping in the line, I'll, ask them and tap them on the shoulder. And I'll be like, "Excuse me, what are you doing? Can't you see? There's a queue. Please respect the queue. Get to the back of the line." Now, the third thing I want to go over is probably personally my favorite. And it is pub culture. Because the pub is a huge part of British social life. People go to the pub to meet friends, watch football or other sports, eat a Sunday roast, maybe playing darts or playing pool, and we have pub quizzes as well, which are quizzes where locals will go and they will work as a team to see if their team will be able to win the quiz and get a prize, which tends to be maybe a round of drinks. Nowadays, it's true that a lot of pubs have been shutting down. They've been closing all over the country. And this is really sad to see because the pub has always been an essential part of life and a common meeting point. So I think the younger generation are drinking a lot less. And there are so many taxes and so many expenses for running a pub. So if you don't manage to have regulars who are going to the pub, filling it out, consuming things there, it gets too unaffordable. And owners, the landlords, they have no choice but to close it down. So it's the sad reality that many smaller pubs in the countryside, they're shutting down. So if you go to visit the UK, I would encourage you to support a pub. And a lot of the ones that exist at the moment and continue to thrive and be successful are the ones that are like gastropubs, meaning that they're almost more of a restaurant than a bar. And you have traditional English food, fish and chips, pie and mash, bangers and mash, shepherd's pie, you name it. The best place to eat traditional food from the United Kingdom is usually in a pub. Now, the next one is a little bit controversial, and it is the royal family. Because, of course, the United Kingdom is a monarchy, and the head of state in the UK is the king. But he's also the head of state in Canada, Australia, New Zealand. So we have to speak about the royal family when it comes to talking about traditions and culture in the UK. Because the monarchy is deeply linked and entwined to British identity and history. So major royal traditions include royal weddings, coronations, the changing of the guard. And some people love the monarchy, others dislike it, but it still remains a huge cultural symbol. And if anybody visits London, I guarantee you're going to go to Buckingham Palace. And I think it's something that we should preserve. But at the same time, there are aspects of the royal family that I don't like. And the concept is unfair. Not only unfair for taxpayers, normal people who are not born with this privilege, so we have to pay our taxes to be able to keep the royal family alive. But I wouldn't like to be a prince or princess because you're born into a family where you're only ever really going to have one role and one job. And it's very hard to get out of this obligation. So I don't think it's fair for them either. So personally, I'm pro-republic. But in the case of my country, England and the UK, I think it works relatively well for us. And most people who have been taught throughout their whole life, princes, princesses, kings and queens, they're probably more prepared than most politicians. So, I'm a little bit torn. I'm in between two minds about it. Now I'm going to continue telling you about the UK and British culture by talking about British humour. Because British humour is often dry, sarcastic, and it's self-deprecating, meaning that we laugh at ourselves a lot. We make ourselves the butt of the jokes. So if maybe you're single and you're trying to meet people, but you never go on dates, you might make a joke about this, saying that, well, you haven't been on a joke for years. Maybe you've never been on a joke. If you take your pants off, you've got cobwebs, spider webs. So we tend to be quite self-deprecating and understated with our jokes. And we usually joke about the weather, politics, ourselves, awkward situations, and many other things. And of course, if you're curious about British humour and comedy, Google it, search classic TV programs, sitcoms about British humour, and you'll start to get the gist of it. And my other favourite thing about British culture is football. Not only football, because we invented a lot of sports. We invented, I think, golf, tennis, rugby, cricket, football, of course, darts as well, I think, maybe. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. But we invented a lot of sports. However, we're not the best at any of these sports, which is ironic, but hey, it is what it is. But football, the culture around football is amazing. If you want to go and watch a football match in the stadium in the UK, you're going to have a blast. You're going to have a ball. If you want to go to the pub with your mates to watch footy, you're going to have a great time, if you're into it, of course. So, English and British football culture is great. The rugby culture is great as well. Going to the cricket as well is amazing. So, I think we have a very strong sporting culture, despite the fact that we're usually quite bad at most sports. Maybe there's something in the water. I'm not sure. Now you know more about British culture, and I'll tell you a little bit more about British culture soon. Let me share my screen and show you some conversation questions, and I'm going to choose some of them as always and answer them. Question number 1 is, how has globalization affected local cultures? How has globalization affected local cultures? Well, there are pros and cons, like with most things, but it's true that Americanization has taken over a lot of the world. So there are many shops, fast food chains, McDonald's, KFC, Burger King, that exist all over the world. And I'm not a fan of this. I don't like this. So when I travel abroad, I never really want to go to these fast food establishments. But the world in the last 100 years has become very globalized, which I think dilutes local cultures. It means that we tend to lose some traditions, some cultures. Other traditions evolve and change over time, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But with business and Americanization, I do think it's a shame that some local cultures are being diluted, so you don't notice them as much as you used to in the past. Number 2, what traditions are most important in your country? Well, I've already kind of covered a lot of these, but outside of that, Christmas is obviously a huge tradition and religious celebration. So Christmas is probably maybe the most important day in the UK. Then we have Easter, which is another religious celebration, which is celebrated a lot. But apart from that, there aren't that many other traditions. And I sometimes discuss this with French, Spanish, Dutch, Belgian, German friends, and they seem to have preserved more local traditions than we have in the UK. And this again, I think is a little bit sad. I think we should try to hold on to local folkloric traditions because it's beautiful and it can be a moment of community to bring the community together. And number 3, what cultural differences have surprised you when traveling? I'd say one of the things that surprises me the most is when you travel to certain countries where they eat with their hands. So eating with your hands and not eating with cutlery, a knife, fork, and a spoon always shocks me a little bit. And this is absolutely fine. I'm not saying anything wrong about it or anything against it. But when I have visited different countries, it's not very natural for me to pick up food with my hands and put it in my mouth. I don't know why. I wasn't raised this way. I didn't grow up this way. And I like to keep my hands as clean as possible when I'm eating. Unless you're eating maybe fried chicken, then it's normal to pick it up with your hands, or a sandwich or a pizza, you pick it up with your hands. But the idea of picking up rice and a sauce and then putting it in my mouth, it's not my thing. It's not for me. Let's put it that way. So that is one little cultural difference that has surprised me, and I can't really get used to it. Sorry, but that's my point of view. But there are many other things, of course. Different cultures do things at different times. Different cultures have different religions and these religions can affect their way of being and way of living. So the list, I think, is endless. Now, number 4, what stereotypes do people have about your culture? What stereotypes do people have about my culture? Well, people think that English people drink tea all the time, but in reality, nowadays, we drink more coffee than tea. Another thing is people think we drink a lot, which is true sometimes. When Brits go abroad to Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece, we tend to binge drink, drink a lot in a short amount of time and get hammered. We get hammered. And if you're hammered, you are very drunk. So this is a negative stereotype that people have about us. And it's true for most people, or at least a large amount of people who go abroad. But of course, a stereotype is a stereotype. It's not always true. It is a generalization. Another stereotypes that people have is having a cup of tea at 5 o'clock. This doesn't exist. It's fake. Fake news. In particular in Spain, some of my friends or family will say, let's go to England, let's go to London and have tea at 5 o'clock. This isn't a thing. This doesn't really exist. We have tea at any time of the day. If you're at work and you've got a little break, you'll have a cup of tea. If you're bored watching TV in the evening, you'll have a cup of tea. But it's not time constrained. It's not limited to certain times of the day. I had to get that off my chest, as you can see. Now, question number 5. Which country's culture would you like to experience? Which country's culture would you like to experience? There are so many that I would love to experience, but right now I think I'm going to go for cultures that I believe are exciting, interesting, eye-catching, and I think I could adapt to it relatively easily. And these are ones that I don't know, of course. So I'd say China. I would love to experience Chinese culture and see how Chinese people live, interact, socialize, eat, because it is such a huge country, and it is a country that us in the West, we know relatively little about. So China is definitely one that I would love to experience. And apart from that, if I'm being more ambitious and more adventurous, I'd maybe go for like an African tribe. And I wouldn't be able to get used to this and live there for a long period of time. But in Kenya, Uganda, where you have lions, elephants, zebra, you have certain tribes that live in small communities, and they do everything in a very sustainable way. I've forgotten the name of the famous tribe in Kenya, but it's the Maasai something. Maasai, I don't know. Let me know in the comments. I could Google it, but I'm not gonna. I want you to tell me. The Maasai something. So I'd love to experience their culture because it's so unique and so foreign to most of us. Now, number 6, what's your favorite national celebration or festival? Well, I love festivals, and in the UK, we are spoilt for choice, meaning we're in a very, very lucky situation because we have lots of festivals. Maybe the best festival in the world is Glastonbury, so I would love to go to Glastonbury. I have friends who've been and they say it's unbelievable, it's unreal, it's incredible. I've been to other festivals in the UK from my city, Leeds Fest or Reading Fest, but I haven't been to that many outside of that. And about different national traditions and celebrations, well, there are many in Spain that I love and I would love to go to. In Valencia, You have like a firework festival called Las Fallas. You have the running of the bulls in Pamplona, which is very dangerous. And I wouldn't actually run in front of the bulls, but I'd like to experience that kind of festival. And I've never been to Munich. And as a result, I'd love to go to Oktoberfest. And talking about Oktoberfest, that is a perfect segue. It's a perfect way of linking me with some other national celebrations, traditions around the world. So, starting with Oktoberfest, it's funny because Oktoberfest, I think, is actually celebrated usually in September. I think it starts at the end of September. And, well, you have lots of Germans and people from around the world that will gather and they'll all go into these big tents, these big pavilions, wearing typical dress, lederhosen, these hats, and everybody will be holding on to a stein. At least in English, we call these big 2-liter glasses steins. So it's the world's largest beer festival. So what's not to like? I feel like I should go sooner rather than later. And you have German food, you have music, these huge beer tents, and it began as a royal wedding celebration in 1810. That's a little fact for you. That's how Oktoberfest begun. And I think nowadays you also have a lot of like fair rides, roller coasters, these kind of games, but I'm not too interested in that aspect of it. The next cultural tradition celebration is an Indian one. It comes from India and it is, correct my pronunciation, Diwali or Diwali. And it's known as the Festival of Lights. And what Diwali symbolizes is light over darkness. It's a Hindu celebration. And it also emphasizes good over evil and prosperity and new beginnings. So people decorate their homes with lots of candles, lamps, and colorful patterns called rangoli, apparently. And I've never been to India. I know it is the most populated country on planet Earth, and it is a very growing economy and culture. So I love Indian food. So who's to say I wouldn't love going to India and experiencing Diwali for myself? The third one I want to bring your attention to is what might be the best party in the world. Maybe this is the best one of all of them. Because I follow football, of course, and one of the most famous Brazilian footballers, Neymar, he always deliberately got injured just before Carnival in Rio de Janeiro so that he could go back and celebrate Carnival with his family and friends. And I think there have been other famous Brazilian footballers who have done the same thing. And we have different carnivals around the world. You have Carnival in Spain, you have it in Italy, you have it in France, you have it in Germany. Carnival exists in many different places. But the one in Brazil is the most, well, exciting, I think. And you have samba dancing, huge parades, colorful costumes, street parties until the crack of dawn. And it takes place before Lent. And it attracts millions of visitors every single year. And I've got students who are from Brazil or other countries who have experienced Carnival themselves. And I want to do it. I think it'd be a little bit stressful with so many people, but I want to go. So, Carnaval, vamos, vamos. Next, we're going to the other side of the world and to China. So, In China, they always have a separate New Year's celebration. In most of the West, we have New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. We celebrate with fireworks and hugs and kisses and a countdown. But in China, it's a little bit different. And this major celebration is based on the lunar calendar, featuring dragon dances, fireworks, red envelopes with money that I think grandparents will pass down to their children and grandchildren. And all of this, of course, is a big family celebration. So you have family get-togethers, gatherings, and reunions. And each year is connected to a different animal from the Chinese zodiac. So you have the year of the scorpion, the year of the dragon, the year of the rat. I'm not sure if the rat is an option, but I think so. But yeah, I'd love to go to China, and I'd love to go to celebrate Chinese New Year. Now, back to the Americas, we have this amazing celebration, which is quite unusual for many people because most of us are afraid of death. In the UK, we try to avoid speaking about death. And maybe it's something that we should embrace. We should talk about death more often. Because most of the time, if somebody mentions death, funerals, then we want to change the topic as quickly as possible. So for that reason, I like what they do in Mexico, or Mexico, where they celebrate the Day of the Dead, El Día de los Muertos. And this tradition honors loved ones who have died by giving altars, different offerings. They all paint their faces, of course, and make their faces look like skeletons. I imagine there's lots of music, lots of food, flowers all over the place as well. And what it tries to do is put a positive spin on the theme of death by making it a celebration, making it colorful, joyful, to look back and remember your loved ones rather than to feel sorry and sad that they're not there anymore. So I would absolutely love to go to Mexico. I've never been, and I love Mexican food. And if it could coincide with the Day of the Dead, even better. Now, how about this one? This is called Songkran. If you're looking at the screen, you can see lots of people in the streets somewhere in Southeast Asia, and they've all got water guns, and they're spraying each other, and they are all absolutely soaked. They're drenched. And it's a celebration which happens around Thailand's New Year, and it's famous for these giant water fights in the streets, because water symbolizes cleansing, renewal, and good luck. And I only discovered this celebration this year because it popped up on my Instagram feed of people going to Thailand and experiencing Songkran, this water fight New Year's celebration. And I've been to Thailand, and I had a blast. I had a ball. It was a great place with lots of friendly people. And I love Thai culture as well, because people are very smiley, very cheerful, very happy, very open. So it's a lovely place, if you ask me. Now, most of you will know I'm very familiar with Spain, and I lived in Spain in the past. And there are so many celebrations in Spain that are related to each different province, autonomous community. Every town has its own fair. So Spaniards are very good at holding on to their traditions. So I could have chosen between lots and lots of different ones, but I've picked the one that I think most foreigners will see and think, wow, that's a bit weird. That's a bit strange. And it is La Tomatina. And La Tomatina is, well, a big fight, let's say, of tomatoes. So it's a famous food fight festival where thousands of people throw tomatoes at each other in the streets of a small town called Buñol. Buñol. And it's messy, it's chaotic, and incredibly popular with tourists. I'm not sure how many locals actually go, but between tourists, well, it looks like they have a great time, but they get very messy. So I wouldn't mind going to La Tomatina, but I think I'd get too messy and I'd get a bit stressed as a result. Now, there are other celebrations. I could talk to you about Thanksgiving. I could talk to you about many different things, but let's keep this a little bit more centered on the UK and British traditions. Because one of them I didn't mention when I was introducing this topic was the following one, and it is known as Bonfire Night. Bonfire Night. And, well, Bonfire Night is something that is celebrated at the start of November. And the start of November announces the arrival of Bonfire Night, also known as Firework Night or Guy Fawkes Night. And this event is celebrated all over the country on the 5th of November each year, and it draws its roots from an event that took place in London many centuries ago. The celebration is named after the villain Guy Guido Fawkes, who in 1605 plotted with a group of conspirators to blow up the Houses of Parliament and kill King James I and his ministers. Unfortunately for Guy Fawkes, while he waited to light the barrels of gunpowder hidden in the cellar of the House of Lords, he was discovered, arrested, and later executed along with his friends. So to celebrate the failure of the gunpowder plot, the day was made a national day of thanksgiving. The popular rhyme about the falling of Guy Fawkes, "Remember, remember, the 5th of November, gunpowder treason and plot," is still recited today. And today, figures of Fawkes were created and are created using straw, paper, or old clothes, and are then thrown on a huge bonfire to begin the festivities. Today, it's not only become custom to see Guy on the bonfire, but also you can add modern political figures as a contemporary satirical twist. So if it were up to me, maybe I'd put Boris Johnson or David Cameron on top of the bonfire as well. So this is one of the few traditions and celebrations that are still really, really common all over the United Kingdom. And that is Bonfire Night. Bonfire Night. And let me know, what kind of traditions, celebrations do you have in your country, and which ones do you like the most? Tell me in the comments, and of course, if you join my classes, you can tell me all about these things using your own voice, and, well, I will listen to you. And of course, if you're not up for joining classes and taking the time out of your routine, you can always try my application where you can note down all of these different words, phrases, practice the pronunciation. You can talk with my AI version as well, so that way you're still practicing from the comfort of your own phone whenever you want. Now from there, let's have a look at some idioms. And we're not going to do a matching activity, but rather, here there are 8 different conversation questions, each using an idiom or expression which is more or less related to the topic. And I'm going to have a little bit of water because I've been speaking for over half an hour and I'm getting a little bit thirsty. But let's begin with the first question. It uses the expression a melting pot. So is your city a melting pot of cultures? And how does living in a melting pot affect daily life? So my hometown, Bingley, isn't really a melting pot. Usually in the United Kingdom, you don't have a lot of immigration in smaller towns or villages, but you have a lot in bigger cities. And I live in Brussels at the moment, which is absolutely a melting pot of cultures. Because, of course, you have the European Union, Commission, Parliament, so you have people who come to work here from all of the 27 different member states. And not only that, but you also have different migrants from parts of Africa, Asia, America, meaning both North, Central, and South America. So Brussels is absolutely a melting pot of cultures. And I think there are some neighborhoods where you will notice you have lots of Turkish people. There's another neighborhood where you have lots of Spanish people. Another neighborhood where you have lots of Moroccan people. And this, when done correctly, I think can add so much to a city because it can give you different types of restaurants, different types of culture, different types of ways of looking at life. So I believe that melting pot cities can be hugely beneficial as long as we all have the right approach and we all have empathy for each other and we want to, to mix, to get together, to get to know more about each other. And as I always say, the best philosophy we can have is live and let live. So if some people want to do their thing, let them do it. If you want to do your thing, you can do it, as long as it doesn't interfere too much with the other people. But I think most cities nowadays are definitely melting pots. The second question, what is a habit you can't change? Why do you think old habits die hard for people? Meaning it's difficult to change a habit. Well, a habit that I can't change is maybe being very clean. So sometimes I'm quite bad at vacuuming, cleaning different things, and being on top of my cleanliness. And it's quite a hard habit to change because old habits die hard. I have my level of cleanliness, which I'm quite happy with. So when I try to be cleaner, it's a struggle. It's difficult. So for that reason, I do believe that old habits die hard. Next, how about, for example, the third one. Have you ever broken with tradition in your family or culture? And what happened when you did? To break with tradition is not to continue a tradition. And well, you could say that I'm getting married this year and I'm not going to have a religious ceremony. So we're going to have a civil ceremony. So in many ways, that breaks with tradition because my parents got married in a church. My fiance's parents got married in a church, but neither of us actually go to church. So it would be a little bit hypocritical to get married in a church, even though it's really beautiful. So in that way, we are breaking with tradition. The fourth question, what traditions do you think are important to keep alive in modern society? As I was mentioning earlier, I love the fact that in some countries, local communities have kept these folkloric kind of celebrations, like Carnival would be an example. So I think any of these celebrations should be maintained. They should be kept because it's nice to pass down these traditions to your children and grandchildren. And I think, the more diverse celebrations we can have in the world, the better. And absolutely, in Seville, for example, I've mentioned on the podcast with La Feria Sevilla, the fair, this tradition is passed down from generation to generation. So it's something that is transferred from one generation to another. Now, how about the sixth question? Do people in your country like to dress up for celebrations? And when do you usually dress up? So, people in my country, we don't dress up for that many different celebrations because we don't really have carnival. And usually people dress up for carnival. We do obviously dress up for Halloween and we go trick or treating. And if you are a little bit older, you're a teenager, you go to different clubs or you go to house parties and you dress up as a zombie or a witch or who knows what. So that's the main thing that I think people dress up for. And one more question. Have you ever moved somewhere new and struggled to fit in? And to fit in is to feel like you connect, that you belong in a group or community. And I think it can be difficult when you're moving abroad to fit in with locals. I think this happens for all of us. Here in Brussels, I don't have that many Belgian friends, but I have friends who are from different countries. So the outsiders tend to mingle and get together because you're all in the same boat, because nobody is a local. But in many scenarios, even if you have very good intentions and you want to make friends with people who are the nationality of that country, it can be a little bit tricky because these groups might be a little bit closed off. They might not be looking to make new friends. There are only so many friends we can have. And in my case, I don't want to have a big group of friends because then I don't have the time or the social battery to maintain all of these friendship groups. So that's a generic message to say that it's normal when you move somewhere to struggle to fit in with the local people. But I think the best way to try to do this is, of course, by, well, being nice, having a smile on your face, treating others how you expect to be treated. And a practical tip is to look for communities or activities that you enjoy and think that other people will enjoy. So, speaking about my neighbor, he signed up for a local football team last year. And before then, he didn't really have any Belgian friends. He's Spanish. But since signing up to play for this Saturday, Sunday football matches, now he's got a group of local friends. So he gets to see the city in a different light. So I think this is a tip to join a football club, a community, dancing classes, language classes, you name it, to be able to fit in with other people. That's what I'd say. On that note, I think we'll call it a day, but I hope you enjoyed this podcast all about traditions, cultures, telling you about British cultures as well. And as I said at the beginning, please leave a like if you enjoyed it or found it useful. And I'll see you in just a few days. So always a pleasure, never a chore, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.